This is a presentation showing the new features within Alphacam 2016 R1. This presentation will show the new command Automation Manager. Automation Manager is basically an evolution of the cad-cam style layer processing command. It has many of the same features, but basically it is now becoming a much more comprehensive product with many more features and will be extended further as the product moves forward. Once again, it is a batch processing engine. The whole idea of it is to take either Alphacam drawings and 2D CAD files or solid files, but take many files at the same time and process them either by applying toolpaths to the 2D geometries or by feature extracting and then applying 2D toolpaths to the feature extracted geometries. But we're talking about obviously processing many files automatically. We can have multiple configurations, so we're able to set the system up to work with nested parts. So we'll take the parts in, process them, and then nest them. And also do the same thing with non-nested parts. So we're just going to take an individual part in, apply the toolpaths, and then output the NC code. Obviously, as part of doing all of this processing, we can also generate reports as well. We'll have multiple setups within the system. So you'll have a setup, for example, for your one type of features where we're just applying information to a CAD file that we've brought in. Maybe we could set some automatic Z levels on the CAD file and then apply auto Z level toolpaths, or we can work on solids and then work with the feature extracted geometries and apply applicable machining styles. The setups are obviously there designed to work with whatever features that the customer requires. We have the option to define a comprehensive material database, so the user will obviously set this up to exactly the materials they have within their system, and then the system will process according to the actual materials that the user has. We can also apply multi-drilling. If the user has a machine with a multi-drill head, then we can apply the toolpaths on parts or nested sheets, and it will multi-drill the nested sheet. And this will obviously all be dependent upon the machines that the user has, and we can set up and configure many multi-drill configurations. If required, we can also apply tool ordering, so the toolpath will be applied, and then if we've selected a tool ordering list, the order of the tools will be changed to obviously reflect what we have set up in our tool ordering list. We also have the option to import CSV files, and we have a import settings area where we can completely configure different setups to allow different CSV formats to be read in. And should you require it, if you're having problems, you're actually able to collate a support file which will create a zip file of all the pertinent files in the system to enable you to send it to your support team, and then they can open these files and basically look at your configuration on their PCs to look for any problems you're having and give advice, or maybe speak to development if we found any problems. New setups and configurations within the system are only possible if you have an active maintenance contract. So now let's go and look at a demonstration of Automation Manager within Alphacam 2016 R1. Before we launch Automation Manager, let's have a look at the buttons that we have available to us on the Automation Manager ribbon. The first button is to actually launch Automation Manager. The second button is to create a support zip file. Now this will take all of the relevant data from Automation Manager, put it into a zip file which you can then send to your support team. There is a button inside Automation Manager to do the same thing, which does allow you to then add additional files if necessary, and we'll have a look at that later. For any existing cad-cam style layer processing users, you will obviously now really be looking to port your information over into Automation Manager, and we can use this button to import all of your current style layer processing settings. And here we can obviously launch the Automation Manager help. Once again, that can be launched from inside. So let's launch Automation Manager and have a look at what we have available. So we have our series of tabs across the top on the ribbon. We'll work our way through these. The processing is the main area once the system is configured that you will go to process your orders. We can see here a list of existing customers and orders relating to them. So obviously if you want to create a new customer, we click the new customer and you will fill in the details accordingly. If you want a new job, you can add that in here. We'll have a look at that in a little while after we've configured a new job or a new setup. And this is where you can then add the files that you want on that order. Any existing orders will have all of the relevant files, and here we obviously specify whether we're nesting them or the quantities we want, or whether it's just a single part, in which case you don't need to change any nesting settings. Let's actually have a look at the layer mapping setups now. So this is the area where we start to configure a setup. So the way the system works is it processes files that have geometries either on user layers, or if you're using feature extraction, it will feature extract onto user layers, and then we assign machining styles that we've predefined to each user layer, and we can affect tool directions and tool side to allow the machining of the parts that we're processing. So let's have a look at a existing setup here. So this is for a setup where we're importing DXF files that are to do with stairs. So we can see the user layers that will be contained within the drawings that we will be importing, and then each one of these has a machining style applied to it. So any geometry that is found on that user layer will have the applicable machining style set to it. If we click on the machining style, we can then see over here the information about the machining style, the tool directions that we're using, the tool directions and the start points. And we actually see here we're processing a 2D DXF file. What I can actually do is detect the features on that layer and set automatic Z levels onto it. Now the reason I'd want to do that is that then means I can have a collection of machining styles that are auto Z, rather than necessarily having to have completely defined sets for each different thickness that I might be processing. As the Z level changes, then obviously the machining style moves with it. So this is an existing setup. Let's have a look at creating a new one. So we click New Setup, and it obviously processes and creates the setup, but we need to put in the relevant details. So let's give it a name to start with. This is going to be a setup for me to create some cabinets. What to extract? Well, I know the solid files that I'm going to be processing doesn't actually have any drillable holes because I'm processing solid parts here. So I'm just going to set it up to select and feature extract contours. If we have a look at the feature extraction settings, obviously I can auto align the part, and I want to use a panel alignment. So we're going to use the open air pocket method, and we're going to extract the top face. All of the parts that I'm processing are going to be nesting, so all the machining is from vertical. The rest of the feature extraction settings, obviously look at these. You know, if we tick this one, then we can obviously make sure that the solid remains in the drawing after we've processed it. This could be relevant for any reverse side machining. And I want all my parts to align with the X where possible. Obviously they're going to be nesting, so the parts will be rotated sometimes where accordingly, but this is to do with the feature extraction settings if we weren't nesting, if we're going to process the parts. So when I'm happy with the settings there, that's fine. What I need to do now is create my feature extraction layers. So I'm going to add the feature layers, and this imports all of them. Any user layers that don't have a machining style assigned to them will be cleared when we close Automation Manager. The parts that I'm going to be working on, I know that the areas will be extracted onto the open areas user layer and the outlines user layer. So on my open areas, I want to do some pocketing, and we can have a look at obviously the machining operation that is contained within that. And I'm going to just drag that to the open areas user layer, and now we see here the confirmation that it's the layer name, the machining style that would be applied to it. Now I have the option here, I can, if I want, set the tool side and the tool directions, but I'm actually having that come off my feature extraction settings, so I'm going to leave Automation Manager set at no change. Now because it's feature extraction, I want to be using the geometry Z levels, so I'm going to tick this, and I'm not going to be setting any Z levels. It will automatically be set by feature extraction. And now let's set up outlines. So I'm going to drag my outlines machining style to my outlines layer, and once again going to set the geometry Z levels there. This is all that's required for this setup. It's quite a simple setup, so not so many machining styles required as when I was machining my stairs. So now I have that set, I need to look at maybe my materials. Do I have all the required materials configured? So if I click on this tab, I have a list of all the existing materials I've got. 19mm thick, what sheet size have I got, and how many sheets. So let's add a new material type, and we'll call this one beech. I need to add a thickness to that, and I want a thickness of 19mm, and then I need to add a sheet to this. Need to click enter there to select that, and on my sheet it's an 8x4 sheet by default. I can obviously change the size of it here if I want, and how many I have of the sheets. So I've left the sheet name as sheet 5 by default. What we'll now do is move on to the multi-drill tab just to have a quick look at the settings here. I'm not going to do any multi-drilling on these parts because I haven't got any drilling, but if we look here, we have a look at the configuration, and this is already predefined using Alphacam's multi-drill setup, but here it shows which configuration we'll be using, and we'll see where we could apply the multi-drill head that we have configured later. Obviously any multi-drilling that we're doing, we can configure the particular Z levels that we want it to drill to in here as well. We also have the option to do tool ordering just to make sure that the machining is applied in the particular tool list order that we require. So what we could do is add a new tool list and then give this a name here. So let's call this cabinets again. And now we add tools to the list. So if I add a tool, it's now browsing to my tooling library. So I'm going to go into here and I'm going to pick a tool that I'd want to be processed first, and then add the next tool that I want. So I've got a list of tools that I'll be using in the cabinets. Obviously, depending on if you haven't added them in the correct order, you can reorder them here if you want. Let's now go to configuration. Well, we can see I've got a configuration here for single parts. So this is where we're listing the setup name, the post processor we're using, whether we're using a multi-drill unit, and where we want the files to be processed to, any relating NC file name extension. Some file names the controls don't like with spaces in, so you can obviously get the system to automatically put a space in, replace a space with the underscore. You have the option here to run a VBA macro to carry out custom processes, and we can disable screen updates, so this will process the parts quicker without actually seeing them process inside Alphacam. We can also create default materials and generate auto styles. So Automation Manager basically with the layer mapping setup can create an auto style that you can then go and use just in regular Alphacam for speed of processing the machining of parts. So let's add a new configuration, and we'll call this one cabinets again. Which post processor are we going to use? We click this and we go to our list of post processors. So I'm looking for my Automation Manager post. Multi-drill head we're not using. Where do I want my files to be going out to? So I can click here and then browse to where I want my files to be going. And we're going to have a folder in here called Alpha Automation Manager Processed Files. Let's say OK to that. I want to select the same folder for all of these. NC file name, we can leave it at the default Alphacam NC file name extension if we want. I'm just going to change this so we can see that on the parts that we process, and make sure we have no spaces. I'm not going to run a custom VBA macro. Let's disable the screen update so we can see the parts processed quicker, and I'm not going to set any of the default materials or generated auto styles in this instance. Now let's look at the nesting options. So here we want to pick our rad nest true shape nesting. This is the latest nesting engine within Alphacam, and we can obviously pick our sheet packing options. So I'm going to say maybe bottom left, and you can obviously specify the time per sheet. So we're saying here 2 seconds. Search resolution is obviously depending upon the nesting method. It's going to improve once again the speed of processing. And should your parts have apertures in them, you can obviously pick this option here to stop any parts going within those apertures. With that unticked, it may nest parts within parts. So here we obviously get to set what gap we want between our paths. So let's say 1 mil between the paths, let's say 3 mil at the edge of the sheet, and I'm not going to go for any extra gap at the lead-in start. We have our nesting extensions that you'd normally see in Alphacam's nesting, so we might want to cut small parts first, do the inner paths first. You get the option to leave edge gap uncut. We want to minimize tool changes. You get the option for bridge nesting, support tags, and obviously you can split nested sheets as well. And what we also do see is we get the option to onion skin parts. So if I select this, I can now specify in here a minimum X or Y dimension for a part, a minimum area for a part, and the onion skin thickness. So I'm going to say a skin thickness of 1 millimeter, and then when do we want to cut? Do we want to cut at the end of each part or the end of each operation? The end of each operation is usually the best method, and you can obviously do that through internal apertures as well. I'm not going to select that. So I have my configuration settings there. What about my reports? So I can pick my report settings here should I require. So I can pick a series of layouts and my data settings. So I'm going to go for nested sheets, and I'm also going to run nested tools. The data settings, where do we want those to go to? This is non-nested parts. I'm not going to be processing non-nested parts, so I can leave these blank. And what we can do is basically tick here and do silent report generation, so it's not going to actually fire up the Alphacam reporting engine. So I'm going to leave that unticked so we can actually see the report come out, and we can have the reports exported in a PDF format as well. So that's my configuration done. Let's now go to the import settings. I can see I've got one here already defined for cabinets, where it's going to be looking at my CSV file, and this is the list I have, but I'm missing one field. I need an additional field for the rotation angle, so let's just add a field. It's going to be in column 7, and what do I want in there? I want nesting rotation angle. Now the information down here in this dialog tells you what are the suitable inputs for each one of these items. So the nesting rotation method, you can obviously fix it here depending on having grained material. So when I'm happy with all of these settings, I can now go back to my processing tab and I can create a new job. Let's call my new job cabinets. I'm going to pick my layer, my configuration settings, as cabinets, my layer mapping setup as cabinets. Material I can pick here, but I am actually going to import a CSV file, and I'm going to work with the CSV file. Let's select this option. We can pick a tool ordering list, and now we can put in here any order information. And obviously order dates, etc. When we need to add some parts to it, I can obviously click here, add files to job, and I can go off and browse for files. As we see here, we can look for Alphacam drawings or DXF or DWG, or I can change this to solids, where we're obviously looking for all different solid file types. I'm not going to use that method in this instance. I'm going to import a CSV file, and it's using the cabinets import settings. So if I click this, I now need to go and browse for where they are. So if I look under Lycom Dir, let's go into my Automation Manager setups and pick my CSV file, and that has now read in the list of parts. And if I look at each one of these, it's set the required quantities and the fact that I want to nest the part, and some have the grain, and because we're picking the maple material, some are going to be fixed with grain in X, but then there might be some that are free rotation because they're on a plain material. When I'm happy with all of these values, I can click Process Job, and I obviously have to confirm that the output folder already exists, and it's now going to start reading in the files, obviously extracting the geometries, and it will then start to apply the tool paths and then nest the parts. This is obviously where disabling the screen updates could be quite useful if you have many parts. So here we see the nest. It's now outputting the NC code for each nest. We have two sheets because there are obviously two different materials in the order, so that will obviously depend upon how many sheets you have. And we now see that it's processing up the report engine. So let's wait for the reports to appear, and we should be getting to see our nested page and our tool list. So here's our tool list, and obviously we can then see that we also have our nested sheets. So here we have a report of obviously each sheet and the parts on it, and let's go down to the second sheet with the plain white material and all the parts that are on that. We obviously then confirm that the parts have obviously been output. We're okay with that, and if I now look at my Windows Explorer, I can go into my order of cabinets. We can see here in nest drawings we have each sheet, and NC files, I get an NC code for each sheet. So if I open this in Alpha-Edit, we'll see that we now have our NC code. So you can see we are talking about very fast batch processing of files. Once the system's set up, all you're going to be doing is basically bringing in an order, telling it which parts to process, and off the system will go. And this is what Automation Manager will be able to bring to you. Before we finish, let's just go and have a look at the Support tab, and we can see here that we obviously have the links to the help file, and then we have the option to collate the support file. So if we click this, it's now gathering all of the information relating to the current setups that we have. So it will grab hold of the databases, all of the machining styles, any tools that are in the tooling file, the active post processors, and any report data, and custom files obviously relating to the actual parts that you've been processing. You can click here, add files, and then you can also go and browse to add any of the files that you may think are of relevance. And once you're happy with this, you can click create compressed file, and this will now create a zip folder or a zip file that you can put anywhere you like to then email or attach to a support case. What you will notice as well is that depending on which tab we're on, we can also see that we have a help icon here. If we click this, this then takes us to obviously the actual page that we're on in the help file to obviously give you the information about what we're looking for. So this concludes the demonstration for Automation Manager. Hopefully everyone will realize what a powerful tool this is, and how once it's set up it really will be able to speed up the processing of your parts.